Hello, I am the High Apostate, the pseudo-religious god-king of the metaphysical micronation of Apostatopolis, where from my tower in the crushing emptiness I watch your timeline being slowly swallowed, and man, that's getting weird. And this is the Apostate's Playground, the somewhat misleadingly titled podcast that makes reaching through the portal to the metaverse's nether regions in order to romp through the Bible, trauma, and my dark past sound more fun than it is. And where I'm trying out a new style of opening to see how I feel about kicking off the show like this, and yeah, I don't hate it. I'm going to make a note about a thing and then jump in. Because I believe in celebrating when you beat your expectations for yourself, and you all helped me achieve that, I will be doing a 1,000 download celebration stream to celebrate all of you listening to me. And a 1-year anniversary stream to celebrate my willingness to stick this out concurrently on May 15th, not hundo peon a time yet. There are 3 games that I decided to put a poll for, and if you want to hear what they are, stick around to the end of the episode. I'm planning on putting the recording up on YouTube and doing all that kind of stuff, so it'll be a thing saved for posterity about the little things that I like to celebrate. It's like when you have a friend you celebrate, gets into a new relationship, and they celebrate, their 6-week anniversary, and it feels like that should be a red flag. It's kind of like that, but for our parasocial relationship. So where we're picking up this time is when the boys, Esau and Jacob, grow up and start running around doing things the way that boys do. Esau is a hunter and man of the field, and Jacob decided to dwell in tents. Isaac and Rebekah played favorites because parents play favorites, and if your parents told you that they don't, they lied to you and you're not their favorite. Isaac's favorite is Esau. Rebekah's favorite is Jacob. Also, it says that Isaac ate Esau's game, which feels like a weird note to include when you don't include what Rebekah and Jacob ate. Presumably because Esau and Isaac are alphas, and Esau is the only one that Isaac really cares about, and Jacob eats people's future, or is a beta male lentil-eating soy boy. So Esau came in from the fields one day and was just hungry as shit. He's just straight up starving dog. And Jacob was making some soup. Some red soup with lentils. I assume red lentils. So Esau was like, dude, give me some of that stew. I'm dying, man. And so they named him Edom because it means red. That's a bizarre fucking way to name people. And not just people, but like whole tribes and nations of people. And I get that this book is from way before the thought of the U.S. in the Western canon, but Edomite sounds pretty Washington football team, now that we've been told that would be the Redites. But ignoring that bizarre naming convention, Jacob decided to go ahead and tell Esau that he would give Esau soup for the low price of Esau's inheritance. So Esau was like, my dude, I'm literally dying. I won't be here to spend it anyway. And while some people might think that was reasonable, Jacob told Esau to super duper pinky promise, because if you don't officially say it, then it isn't a legally binding contract in the eyes of the soup. So the pinky promise was had, and Esau had some lentil soup. Then we're told that he despised his birthright, and that seems like a lot and a weird way to end that, so I have some questions. What was Esau doing in the field that he was so hungry he couldn't eat anything while he was out there? What do rabbis have to say about this story, and what the fuck is this footnote talking about? Taking those in order, Esau was almost definitely not so hungry that he was about to die. I have to imagine that's an exaggeration. But maybe murder takes a lot out of a guy. You see, Esau wasn't just out in the field or out hunting. He was committing a murder. Maybe. According to the Book of Jasher. Or Yasher. Or Sefer HaYashar. Or a forgery from 1800s Europe done by some naughty boys. Or rabbinical manuscript from the 1200s. There's a few different ways to pronounce it, and which one you get kinda depends on who you ask. I probably will ask in another episode, but this episode is about Esau and Jacob, and since none of this is true anyway, I'm not going to let myself be bothered, and will assume that Esau went the way of Cain and abled Nimrod until it's demonstrated that that isn't canon. In the book of Jasher, when Abram is born, Nimrod of Tower of Babel fame had a dream that someone of Abram's line would murderize the shit out of him. Incidentally, Abram is exiled by Nimrod in Islam, and I'm not saying that's motivation or relevant, or given the fact that Islam seems to not even be based in the same part of the comic book multiverse of Judo-Christian Abrahamic religions. I'm not saying it's relevant, but it does fill an otherwise empty plot hole. So Esau comes across Nimrod while he's out hunting and hides in tall grass or a bale of hay, or by walking near monks with a wildly different outfit on, but nobody can see him inexplicably anyway. It doesn't really say, but it does say that Esau goes Assassin's Creed pretty hard. Once the guards had walked away from Nimrod for reasons, because when you get to that general distance, the guards walk away so that you can have the sweet cutscene after you cut off the king's head, I guess. Esau cut off the king's head. He then fought off Nimrod's guards and bounced the fuck on out of there with his magic pants. The magic pants that apparently made him strong. And I know that the magic pants kind of came out of nowhere, and I left it that way because, trust me, it sure the fuck did for me too. And the magic pants apparently made him strong, which, since Esau just killed the guy with the magic strength pants and then took the magic strength pants, how the fuck strong is Esau to begin with, and now with the magical strength pants? Which gives me kind of an additional question, though. Why did Esau kill Nimrod? Was it just for the pants? Was it because he had some weird loyalty to Abram after Isaac kicked him out? Was he just a fan of Papa? And how do the rabbis feel about that? And what the fuck is this footnote talking about? So we're back at 3 questions again. And we're going to take them in order with, why did Esau kill Nimrod? Okay, so Adam and Eve got clothing made of skin. Never mind the fact that it says very clearly in Genesis 3:7 something something, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves covering. After they had pissed God off, he made them magic pants. It's in the extended universe, it's fine. At least it's fine until Disney buys the rights to the Bible, and then it will be the Legends universe with a weird allusion to it being like stories that the people who came after the event tell each other about things like the people's history of the United States in space. So when they weren't using them anymore, A&D passed them down to Cush. Then they went to Enoch, then to Methuselah, then to Noah, and brought them on the ark. And then Ham stole them from Noah, and a thought on this in a moment, and then Ham gave them to Cush 2.0, and Cush 2.0 gave them to Nimrod. So they're a family heirloom. Kind of. With some in-theft. I am wondering, because of the in-theft, if Ham stealing them has anything to do with the story where Ham walks in on Noah being naked. It does make a lot more sense than Ham seeing Noah naked in what was probably a pretty big tent because Noah drank himself unconscious. Although that does make me wonder even more, if Ham had the clothes and they were looking for them, which I assume they would, if I had a magic pair of God-tailored pants that were stolen from me, there were only 8 people alive, and one of them was going around my tent while I'm drunk as shit and naked, you better believe I'm thinking that guy stole my magic pants. Now, I couldn't find anything to back this up because I didn't look very hard because it's not really the point, but you have to think that Noah might have suspected Snoopy McPenis Creeper. The point, though, is that Esau wanted the magic pants, and that's why he killed Nimrod. So with all the murder and fighting and then fleeing, with the hunting before that, Esau was pretty fucking hungry. Although the book of Jasher makes it a point to say that he wasn't ready to die of hunger, he was ready to die of grief. And you may have noticed that I didn't mention what grudge Esau had against Nimrod specifically. That's because on the whole of the internet, the papers I could find, the books of the Bible I looked in, the extra biblical books I looked in, they all told me to fuck myself. And so it is my duty to pass that self-fucking on to you. Frankly, none of this makes a whole lot of sense. I'm dying of grief because I, apparently without motivation, except that one website made a vague gesture towards some undefined grudge, and Islam says that after his bad dream about Abram's spawn killing him, Nimrod kicked Abram out of Babylon, so granddaddy issues. Because the best I can find is that Esau really liked his grandpa. We get more questions about how Esau killed a king, took his magic pants, felt terrible, give me some soup. Did Esau know that Jacob was going to manipulate him out of his birthright? I can't find anything relating to this, or I can, and it will come up in a few episodes. What I can find is what the book of Jasher says Jacob bought from the birthright from Esau with apparently grief-curing soup, acting, the book says this, I don't, I think he's an asshole, acting wisely with Esau in this manner. And it was brought about by the Lord. What Jacob got was Esau's portion of the cave in the field of Machpelah, the one where Abraham and Sarah are buried. So Jacob wrote it down, got some witnesses, and then went ahead and sealed and kept that pinky promise in his book, and I'm not sure that he needed to seal it. Was he keeping it safe? Who's gonna want your burial plot that bad? Seems like a really fucking lame birthright. I mean, I can get it in the context if they talked about some sort of like soul magic being cut off from your family. You're not allowed to be in their heaven estate when everybody comes back from the dead and or goes to heaven. God hates Esau, so Esau's descendants try to murderize God's kid in a dramatic grudge that has been had for hundreds of years, passed down child to child, father to son, until the Holy Father had a Holy Son, despite the fact that this book isn't written that dramatically or with that much foresight. And the arguments for God being omniscient and not knowing the future because the future doesn't exist yet and God can't know about things that aren't because that's stupid. There's nothing to know, so how could you know things about actual nothing? Are better than the arguments for God knowing the future, so how could God have known any of that, which raises another question. What the fuck was God planning? It is a little bit of a trick question, though, I will admit, because the answer is probably nothing. Because in this book, God is just a plot device for when they need the clear bad guy to not be the bad guy in the story, and I needed a way to get back on topic. Then all the kingdoms that Nimrod ruled over, the ones that couldn't understand what anybody was saying, I guess, they all became different countries because what even the fuck is making sense? Esau had the magic pants and the soup, so we're moving on. The second question was, what do the rabbis say about the selling of the birthright? So I found two sources on this, one from Rabbi Mendy Kaminker from Chasad, which I have verified is a Hasidic movement, so they're very orthodox, and Dr. Avigdor Bonchek with Aish, which seems to be conservative, but in a very, we're all Jews and that's the important part kind of way, so they seem to play pretty loose with it. Starting with Rabbi Kaminker, he says that the Hebrew word ayef shows up in other places to talk about murder and gives an alternate line of my soul is exhausted from the killers, and uses that to draw that conclusion that Esau had been off doing a murder. Although it seems that grammar implies someone was trying to kill him, it might be a little more sensible if it said my soul is exhausted from the killing, if he's going for an Esau killed people thing, but I don't know how the Hebrew grammar would fly there. It could just be the same word and he translated it one way and it would make more sense to me the other way. Jacob was cooking that grief-based stew at the time because Isaac was in mourning and round foods are representative of the natural order being like a wheel that rotates and death comes for us all. It also doesn't have an opening, so no mouth to speak with, to be metaphorical of the quiet grieving that the mourner would be doing. Which to me reads like the whole thing was a metaphor for Esau feeling guilty and grieving his actions so that Jacob could release him from his responsibilities and lift his negative feelings. Because beyond that, I don't really see that information serving a purpose except that I know it, and so now you know it. And that leads to the fact that Rabbi Kaminker also reframes the question of what is the birthright a little bit to make it honestly make a lot more sense. The firstborn worked in the tabernacle and then the temple when there was a temple. Jacob wanted that birthright because he was a good boy and Esau was an asshole. And since Esau seems a little murdery in this rendition, I think this might be another Bible story where everybody is kind of an asshole under examination. As an adrenaline junkie who didn't want to serve in the temple, which apparently if you fucked it up, they killed you, Esau didn't want that. And when we take the possibility that Esau wasn't super family duty oriented and didn't want the responsibilities of being the fastest down the birth canal and combine it with Jacob wanting to put his resume in for tabernacle guy, or alternately, according to Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra, Jacob was just a greedy shit who wanted more of Isaac's estates when he kicked the bucket. And since the firstborn gets estate doubles, he was just trying to get Esau's doubles loaded up with his single for some triple. And it kind of raises the question of, did Jacob screw over Esau? One side presented is that the food was actually them sealing the deal with a celebratory meal, and the other side is that these responsibilities weren't worth very much money because, reasons. Although working in the temple because you were born first doesn't seem like something you could really put a price on, so it's considered a fair sale. On the other hand, maybe Jacob just wanted some shit. We'll just have to continue on and see how he does as a patriarch. And Dr. Bonchek, in kind of contrast to this, talks about Rashi, who was a French rabbi from the century of the 1000. I don't know what to call that century sometimes. The thousands? The 11th century? An 11th century French rabbi who died in the 12th century. I have no idea when to tell you Rashi was from. Do I tell you from when he was born? Or when he was working? When his magnum opus came out? When am I from? I don't know when to tell you I'm from, and now I'm having a temporal existential crisis. So Dr. Bonchek tells us that Esau didn't actually despise his birthright. That was a coping mechanism. He was dying, and to save his life, he sold something that meant a lot to him. So he started despising his birthright, which is why it doesn't come up before. If he was just acting that dismissive the whole time, then that would be just a random bullshit line. So that also kind of makes sense, because otherwise they're just telling us for no reason. And I'm super not into trying to legislate what was going on with Esau. The way the story reads out in my reading of it is that Jacob took advantage of a desperate person to swell his personal wealth, and Esau just got mad at his birthright and didn't want it, because that's what we're told in the book. Everything else I'm happy to leave for rabbis and apologists and tell you what they say when I find it. That is why you're here. And speaking of, the third question, what does the evangelist say about it? Something gross and dumb because they're not worried about actually making it make sense and just want to knock down everything you start to worry about as quickly as possible so you can quit thinking about it. Or as he called the horrible death anxiety-inducing hunger, the cravings of the flesh. And that is why he gave up his precious birthright. So if you say that you're faithful, which it doesn't seem like Esau did, without being humble, which we didn't see an example of Esau doing or not doing, and is apparently what the law produces, which isn't what a law does. Most people would establish the necessity for humility as something that is necessary for following the Big L law, not just randomly asserting that if you follow the Big L law, you will get humble. If you don't have that humility that you should probably have first, but apparently get second, you have the 2 Peter experience of dogs returning to their own vomit and sows wallowing in mire, according to the evangelist. Which is pretty fucked up, because apparently the false convert wallows in mire like a swine because the swine wants the slime to cool their flesh. So the false convert isn't torture killed with Christ and is aflame with sinful desire, which is too much for the dirty, filthy, evil, bad boy heart. And fucking shit, that's not what any of that means. And I don't want to do a whole deep dive on why pigs wallow in the mire. So it's just, that's how they cool off. They don't have sweat. They would die otherwise. So if the false convert doesn't, he dies, which I guess since you're supposed to be torture murdered with Jesus is a good thing. Well, you heard it here. Ray Comfort wants you to torture yourself to death. But for his justification on you not sweating to death, let's go to 2 Peter 2:22. The bit that is labeled Deceptions of False Teachers. Fun enough. And talks about the dangers of not being selective enough in your spiritual guides. Also funnily enough. And it's a pretty universal theme in all religions. It seems like good advice here because sometimes you end up with your grandma giving all of her savings to Kenneth Copeland, or you end up in a pickup artistry class or in Nexium or taking life advice from Ray Comfort. It definitely doesn't have anything to do with being soup stoops humble when you say that you're going to Jesus super hard though. So that's seeming pretty illiterate. The other quote was from Galatians 5:25, and it's at least a little close. It's talking about the transformative powers of having a Jesus and how if you don't have the conduct that goes along with being Jesus-y, then you boned. because it's also a list of the works of the flesh that won't be allowed in heaven. So, like, it's closer, but it's not particularly relevant. Then there's the fact that the story is as written. Like I said, Jacob taking advantage of a starving man, but also is just Esau not wanting that job or being guilt-ridden because he killed his distant uncle and stole his magic pants. There's literally no part of that footnote that addresses anything that is relevant to anything, except kind of maybe 1,600 pages later. They're barely in the same fucking book. And that's the rest of Genesis 25. And I know I've been doing bi-weekly. This one's coming out the next week. I'm not speeding the schedule up. I just felt bad making this episode wait, so I went ahead and did the thing. And there's no moral here. There's not even really anything to summarize. Esau might have killed a guy. He had some sadness soup. He sold either a hole or the right to be a holy janitor. This episode was literally just about 2 paragraphs. So, I don't know. I'll make up a moral. Always remember to put a condom on your vegetables before you fuck yourself with them. It won't get in the way of absorbing nutrients because that's not how you get nutrients from vegetables, and it can help prevent yeast infections, which you can get especially with things that have a lot of sugar. And yeah, I don't know about you, but I know that's more relevant to your life than anything that we've read out of this book so far. So the 1,000 download 1-year anniversary stream is set for May 15th, like I said earlier, because it's a personal milestone that you helped me achieve, so gonna do a little get-to-know-you sesh, or be completely ignored by you, and just be sad in my own little world. But otherwise, if it works, I might make it a regular thing. Or a regular patron thing, who knows, the night is young. There's a link to a poll on the Patreon page, both in the show notes and on the Twitter feed, so that you can have input on one of 3 games that I think I could stream reasonably well. Crusader Kings 3 is the first one, and Stanley Parable, which I haven't played. Or, if you want to watch me be in spiritual pain, you can go to the website and click on Skyrim, and I will taint my computer's hard drive, because I don't understand why people like that game. But I'm willing to give it a shot. And I'm willing to give it another shot for you. But until then, I am the High Apostate. This has been the Apostate's Playground. My Twitter, which is really just where I keep random-ass stray thoughts, is the letter X Essential Panda. The show's Twitter, which is really just episodes because I don't know how to do a Twitter, is at Apostasy Powered. You can send compliments and well wishes to poweredbyapostasy@gmail.com, and you can send insults and unwell wishes on Twitter to @SenateGOP. And in the episode notes, you can find a link to the Patreon. Do go take the poll to see whether or not I torture myself, or to what extent I torture myself. And if you are feeling particularly generous, then, you could do the thing while you're there. Or just take the poll. I'm happy with that too. And remember, don't just lock up that cock. Lock up that celery stalk.